Greetings, everybody. This is Focus on Liberia, and today we are having another rendition of the Liberia Leadership Academy class, where we will be discussing the great Elder Lot Carey, along with the mentor facilitators and students of the Leadership Academy.
Yes, hello everyone. Good afternoon to you from our beautiful end. My name is Paul Saley. I'm a youth facilitator for the Liberian Leadership Academy along here with my colleagues.
Yeah, I'm Isiaka Sharif. I'm Isiaka Sharif. I'm also a student of the World Leadership Academy. I'm glad to be here.
I'm Lovelace Etienne, facilitator of the Liberia Leadership Academy. I'm proud to be here once again.
And also, I'm a student of the Liberia Leadership Academy. Always good to be here.
It's not our first time being here, maybe for some, but in most cases, it's not our first time to be here, and it's always a pleasure for us to be here to share what we learned, with so many Liberians today, as it is our honor. And speaking of that, today we'll be talking about Elder Carey, a person who served as a great importance to the Liberian colony before it became a republic. How did he serve great importance to the Liberian colony? Stay tuned with us, and we'll get to take you through a deep journey through Elder Carey's life.
Okay, so before we go further, we have one of our students, so he can also introduce himself.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Kurate Kura, a student of the Liberia Leadership Academy. I'm happy to be here to share with the public also what I've learned from this Leadership Academy.
Right, let's begin with Elder Lot Carey. So first of all, what is significant about Lot Carey? Let's start with that and go forward because we have a presentation for y'all.
All right.
Okay, so from the picture we are seeing on the screen right now is Elder Lakere. He was a Baptist minister. He was born in Virginia, where he was born as a slave in Virginia, where he worked on a tobacco farm, and then later on he was able to learn how to rewrite while working on the tobacco farm. And because of the passion he had for being a minister, he started learning how to be also a preacher, and he was really deep into the gospel. So we're going to go in depth with all of these things and later what led to his army, and when he came, what are some of the important things that he did while in Africa, Liberia presently, this we call Liberia presently.
Yeah, to add up to what my colleague is saying, we're gonna take a look at the transformative journey of Lakiri on how he went from being an illiterate slave to becoming one of the most intellectual minds that served of great importance to the Liberian colony and the people within the Liberian colony.
Thank you.
So, Jabari, if you don't mind helping us to read the background.
Yes. So, Lot Carey was born around the year 1780, 30 miles below the city of Richmond in the county of Charles City. It was believed he was the only child. His father was part of the Baptist denomination. And in 1804, he was removed from his native county to the city of Richmond, Virginia.
Yeah, thank you so much for reading that, Jabari. So, Lot Carey came from a time where people of African descent were very degraded. When I say degraded, they were not respected and they were used as slaves. Lot Carey came from a time where chattel slavery was legal, where the degradation of Black people was legal. But yes, Lot Carey was born in Virginia. He was born to two parents who were also slaves. And then later, after being born in Charles City, he was sold He was sold to the city of Richmond to basically go and be a laborer in a tobacco warehouse. And the tobacco warehouse is where we start to see the heavy transformation of Carey and how that transformation played a huge role in his life. And not only did such transformation play a huge role in his life, but we'll also get to see how it stirs up the need for him to do something greater in a world where African people were heavily being disrespected and degraded. But we can move on to the next slide. Or if you have questions, we can get into some questions before you can move on to the next slide.
I do have just one brief question. So during this time, obviously, it was practically hard for African people to learn how to read and write or to get an education. Was
Yeah.
Lot Carey able to get that, and how did he do it, and how did that affect his life going forward?
Okay.
Okay, so when like Kere was working on the Richmond tobacco farm, remember also that time during that time period, like we just mentioned, people of color did not go to school, or if even if you had the privilege, you won't sit with Europeans in the same class. So because he had that passion of being educated and he wanted to be or scholard, I would say a scholard, he started learning on that tobacco farm with some people that were also working in the farm with him. So he started learning how to read the Bible. They started teaching him how to read the Bible word for word. And as time goes by, he started getting Occam with voice, 2 letter voice, 3 letter voice, and that's how he started improving on a daily basis. So he did not go to sit in class because remember he was a slave, he was also working on tobacco farm. So because of his intelligence and how he carried himself on that tobacco farm that he was working, he got people around him. He had people around him that really used to like him, were inspired by his work. So he also told them that he wanted to learn certain things and he started teaching, and that was how he started catching up with the English or reading and writing.
And to add to that, so he was actually being preached to while working on the tobacco farm. So after he had been preached to, the preaching encouraged him, he decided to learn Bible so that he can quote that particular scripture that was read to him during the preaching. That's how he developed that courage to be able to learn how to read, because he wanted to read that particular scripture that was read to him during the tobacco farm when he was working there. So he decided to learn how to read so that he can recite that particular scripture by himself. That's how he developed courage to start reading.
Yes, to add up to what my two colleagues were saying, it all goes back to what I said earlier when we looked at the first slide. Kerry came from a background where African people were not allowed to enlighten themselves or to seek education because in the state of Virginia, it was strictly prohibited for African children or Black children who were enslaved to go to school. And the reason for this was at the time, white slaveholders understood and knew the power of information. They knew the effects the power of information would have on these enslaved African people and what that would mean for their slave business. Because imagine you enslave an African child, but then you send him to a school where he starts to read. As he starts to read, he starts to enlighten himself. He starts to get wise and gets knowledge. And then once he acquires the knowledge, what do you think he's going to do? He's going to fight for his freedom and he's going to fight for the betterment of himself. And like Carey was one of those. Although he was an illiterate slave, he knew deep down within him he had a potential to be great, and that did not stop him from wanting to learn. And fortunately for him, like my colleague said, when he attended a church, there was a sermon about Jesus and Nicodemus that stirred up the hunger in him to try to get to read the Bible.
Now, was he illiterate, or did he learn how to read and write?
He was illiterate at first, but he then learned how to read. He didn't know how to read or
Okay.
write in the beginning, and we know why.
Okay. In the year 1813, he had accumulated enough money to purchase himself and his two children for $850. He married, this time a second time, in 1815. That year, he became interested in missionary work and the spiritual condition of Africa.
Okay, so this is saying, Lakere, as we said earlier, was a slave, and he was sold to tobacco farm where he was working. But then, all through that work he was doing, while he was also learning how to read, he was saving this money to buy his freedom. So when he had acquired enough money, he paid for his freedom along with his two children to be able to be free and leave that farm to establish life for himself as a determined man. And then later on, he got married for the second time because his first wife died. And all of this he was doing it because he wanted to come to Africa to change the spiritual condition of Africa because he knew exactly what the repatriates they were going through. Being in America and being subjected to what he was living in, he knew that it was important to buy his freedom, come to Africa to contribute to those that were also here suffering.
Yeah, and he also knew that where he was not secure there. And he knew that Africa was his home. And so he know that when you come to Africa and live, definitely you're gonna live free. You're gonna have that God given freedom
Hey,
to
but
live in.
that is disturbing me, okay?
You're gonna get that God given freedom that every man should get. So after purchasing his freedom, he already had the anxiety of being a missionary, which he started practicing on that tobacco farm. And he had an ambition of coming back to Africa, coming to Africa where he know he belongs and where he wanna live freely.
Yeah, so on the aspect on where he purchased his freedom, when Lord Carey worked at the tobacco warehouse, he gained admiration of the warehouse owner. And how did he gain such admiration? He was basically trusted with managing the hogsheads of tobacco. And because he was trusted to watch over these hogsheads of tobacco, he made sure that the shipments of these hogsheads were very much successful on the spot. This gained the trust of the tobacco warehouse owner, and this is where Lacare would start making a profit for himself. But in addition to that, when he already learned how to read, he started to learn how to write. And after learning how to write, it is there that he believed that he had a calling from God to spread the gospel. And he would spread the gospel, he would preach to those in the tobacco warehouse. And not only that, he also believed that there was a higher calling for him to head to the continents of Africa where the gospel needed to be preached. But in addition to that, he believed that Africa was his home. And he said something similar to what before even Martin Luther King Jr. would say. And there's an excerpt for that.
And to add more to that, Lakere was very, very excellent in managing the tobacco warehouse to the point that the warehouse owner used to give him $5 every day. So that was additional money that he was also adding up to be able to use it to buy his freedom. And they
So the
describing that
character, sorry to
they
interrupt
did
you.
this, he was
Yeah,
very fast in putting the shipment together as compared to anyone on the tobacco farm.
yeah. So Paul said something, and I think people must be able to get this. Lockery knew that where he was, despite he being slavery or enslaved, Africa is his home. So he didn't just say, but then all is over. He didn't. He remained focused, and he knew that one day he's going to be free. And when he come to Africa, what he's learned, he's going to come there and then attribute that and see how best he can be able to help his country, Africa. And I think that's what he did when he came, begin to open schools all around here. So I think that was a very brilliant job he did.
Yeah.
Now,
So
I
like
do,
yeah.
now I do have a question for all y'all. So y'all talked about how Africa was his home and that there were a lot of issues going on when he was in Virginia. Can you guys talk about some of the barriers that were happening even when he was emancipated? Was it just, hey, he was able to do what he wanted to do, or were there limitations during that time that really prohibited him from doing what he wanted to do?
Say it again.
The question that I have is, you guys talked about him wanting to go back home, that Africa was his home, and him being a free black person in the state of Virginia. Were there things that were prohibiting him? So even though he was free, were there things that were there were barriers that he faced while in Virginia that, despite him being free, he still had to endure, whether that be discrimination, prejudice?
Oh, there was the main one of those main barriers was definitely prejudice or racism, because we have to understand the time period. This was a time period where black people basically could not do anything, even if they had some form of vote for themselves. These people could not vote. They could not determine the future for themselves. They were in a place where a lot of where a lot of white Americans where basically had dominion over them. So even if they were free, they were not technically and fully free. And Lord Carey knew this. Lord Carey knew that he was in a place where he could not really exert his freedom to full potential. This is why he felt this is why he felt that it would be best if he head to Africa, because he knew Africa would be the best place to exert his freedom and to do whatever he wanted to do. There would be no limitations. And he knew that there would be no systemic racism there, because there were a lot of people there that looked like him. And this is what prompted him to have that mindset that he was indeed an African. And he knew that if he go there, and he knew
Okay,
that if
Paul.
he,
Paul, you're repeating
yes,
yourself. I have a question. You said something very important that everyone glossed over. And you were trying to
yes,
say that back in the year 1822, Locke Carey said something that Martin Luther King would echo many generations later. What was that?
yes. So Martin Luther King had a speech in the early 1960s called "I Have a Dream" speech. And in the excerpt of the speech, Martin Luther King made a statement that he hopes for a day, if I'm correct, he hopes for a day that his children would not be judged by the color of the skin, but by the content of their character. And here we have Lord Carey saying that he wishes to go to a place where his merit would not be judged by the complexion of his skin, but by his conduct. And the similarity, the powerful connection was very amazing. And
It's the same
intriguing,
exact message, right? It's the same message.
yeah,
So,
same
and this
message.
is 146 years before Martin Luther King made his speech. Locke Carey
Yeah,
echoed the same sentiment. What was your
he
point,
echoed the
correct?
same message.
Okay.
Yes, it was a very strong connection.
Excellent, excellent. And so he does head for Africa. So by 1819, Locke Carey, along with one of his close colleagues, Colin T, were determined to go to Africa. Locke Carey later said that, "I'm an African, and in this country, however meritorious my conduct and respectful my character, I cannot the credit receive the credit due to either. I wish to go to a country where I shall be estimated by my merits, not by my complexion, and I feel bound to labor for my suffering race."
Yes, so
Echo,
this, yeah.
good.
So this Excel in 1819 is still talking about Makiri. And Koneti was also a minister, a practicing minister in Virginia. So they both worship in the same church. At some point, Koneti will lead the sermon. And at some time during service time, Lord Kerry will also, just in case they are given the power to do that, they will do it. So this particular essay that said no, Kerry did not say that. It was what my colleague just mentioned, that even during that time period, we already knew from what we've been studying, people of color never had a right. Even you can make a lot of money, you will not be able to use it the way you want to use it. Or even if you had the power to change something, remember you are a slave. You cannot change anything based on your color. So Lord Kerry is saying in this particular essay that with what he had in him being a minister, if he stays in the US or where he was back then, he will never and ever be appreciated, no matter how he worked or no matter how hard he tried. So he want to come to a place which is Africa, present day Liberia. He want to come to a place where he think when he work, people will appreciate, recognize his work. Anything he try to do for people, people will know that he did it. So that's what that particular essay is saying.
Yes, and before Laquer could go back to Africa, the need for wanting to spread the gospel in the continent of Africa led to the formation of the Richmond African Baptist Missionary Church, where the church would sponsor an African missionary on the continent for several years, which happened successfully. But however, it wasn't enough for Laquer. Laquer felt that he had to be there on the ground to do it himself. He felt that was the best way to fulfill his Christian calling. Just wanted to make sure of that. And before he could head back to Africa, he took a year off along with Colin Teague to structure his missionary efforts, such as his sermons and preaching skills, if I'm correct, before they could head off to Africa to start his missionary efforts.
And to add up to that, if you read that essay, you can hear Lakiri describing himself as an African, saying, "I'm an African. No matter how long I stay here, no matter how much I preach, you will not recognize my effort. You will not appreciate my effort. So why not can I go back home in Africa and do this there where I will be respected, I'll be recognized as a human being, than being here when you don't even regard me as a human being."
And that will happen to anybody. That's what Lakira was doing. So instead of me staying here, I should be going back to my home, a land of sovereignty. A land I'm going to be there, I can do things. I mean, to help my country and my people. But I can't be here and all of what I'm doing is not recognized because of my skin color. I think this is unacceptable. So I think that was a brilliant job again.
Very profound, and I love the fact that you brought up his missionary work and his desire to do missionary work. And because Elder Locke Carey, before he headed to Africa, delivered a farewell sermon in the meeting house of the First Baptist Church in Richmond. He said, "I'm about to leave you and expect to see your faces no more. I long to preach to the poor Africans the way of life and salvation. I don't know what may befall me, whether I may find a grave in the ocean or among the savage men or more savage wild beasts on the coast of Africa. Nor am I anxious what may become of me. I feel it my duty to go, and I very much fear that many of those who preach the gospel in this country will blush when the Savior's call them to give an account of their labors in his cause, and tells them, I commended you to go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature."
Yes, his farewell sermon was also very emotional that it drove most of the members in the church to tears because Lord Carey was a very profound preacher and he was also described to be different from other Black preachers in the vicinity.
Yes, so on his departure to Africa, I want to get this straight. He did not pay for his transportation, like though he saved money, he bought his freedom. But I also want to know that he did not pay to come to Africa like others did who bought their freedom or who were emancipated and then maybe raised money and came on their own. So he was actually, because he had the ambition of coming to Africa, the church that he was worshiping with decided to send him as a missionary, he and Connecticut. So in doing that, they had to use the ACS who were already repatriating people, sending people to Africa, and he came along with them.
Excellent. Now, I do have a question. So when he went back to Africa, do we know the ship name that he went back on when he arrived in what's today Liberia?
You want to go? Yeah, so Lord Carey came to West
Hold
Africa.
on. Hi, guys. Jabari, that was a trick question. You said the ship he
Oh.
went on when he arrived in Liberia.
Oh my God.
So
I'm
you
tired.
asked the question correctly. Because any way to answer that question won't be right. So
Yeah.
I believe what Jabari is asking is which ship took him to Africa.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, we got the question regardless.
I'm
So
I'm
yeah,
more concerned about the audience. Okay, go ahead.
yeah, so
Sorry, go ahead.
basically, yeah, so basically, like Carey came to West Africa, Sherbrooke, on the Nautilus in the year of 1821, along with Colin Teague. They landed at Sherbrooke and settled in Freetown. They settled in Freetown, and like Carey believed that was like Carey immediately started to carry out his missionary efforts. But he wasn't exactly able to carry out his missionary efforts because he was appointed to U.S. government agents to care for recaptured Africans on a rented farm until they could procure land to permanently settle the recaptured Africans.
Yeah, and another thing is that he did not come alone. He came with his wife and kids. So he had to sell all of what he ever had for himself, and then said to himself that I'm going, whatever I see there, be it good or bad, I will accept because I want to do this for myself and for my people. So he came on the Netherlands with his family.
Yeah, to add
So,
yeah,
so
continue.
to add to that, when the tobacco fund heard that Lord Kerry is making an attempt to come to Africa, they increased his salary from 850 to 1,000 in an attempt to convince him to stay. If you read that essay, it states clearly that he didn't care about what he was going to read in Africa, what's going to happen after he comes to Africa. His only concern was to come to his brother, to come to his home and gain freedom. So he abandoned all of that, the salary, whatever he had there. His sole purpose was to come to Africa because he wanted to come home to gain freedom and to preach the gospel as well.
That basically tells you that Lord Carey was very selfless.
Yeah.
He knew that he had to put a better cause before himself. But even though he knew that he had to put a better cause before himself, he still struggled with the idea of whether he should go or whether he shouldn't go. He struggled with this for a while before he could actually make his trip to Africa to carry on his missionary efforts. Just wanted
Yeah,
to also
and
make mention of that.
they also tried convincing him to stay because describing the weather condition in Africa,
The rainy season
the
time,
rainy
yes.
season time. Do you think you can cope with that? He's like, I'm going.
And fortunately for him, his immune system held up pretty well, which led me to believe, especially in Sierra Leone, because when you get to Sierra Leone, the malaria there was very terrible, so terrible that it killed his wife. But for him, he seemed unaffected until he got into the Liberian colony. But even though he got affected when he was in the Liberian colony, it wasn't for too long. He got healed up. But going back to Freetown, his immune system held up pretty well, which led me to believe it's possible he could be a descendant from Sierra Leone itself because due to how his genetics were able to hold up to the African fever. I don't know. That was my thought when I studied his biography.
And I'm just thinking about something when he was about to depart the United States, where he decided to have increased his salary from 850 to $1,000, thereby trying to convince him, to stay. I'm just trying to think about that in our dispensation right now. Trust me, there are many persons who wouldn't let that money to go. All right. But Lokere felt that he needed to be free. In fact, if you even add from 850 to $1,000, it wouldn't buy. I mean, it wouldn't set him free. Obviously, he will remain who he is, but because he wanted best future for himself, he wanted total freedom. He wanted to be to a place where he can be able to do something for himself and for a country to do something free there. He decided to have forgot everything and said, "No, I need to go." That's why he came on the break and I lost. I think that is also incredible.
Excellent. I have a question for everyone to contemplate.
Yeah.
We talked about people using religion as a tool for their liberation. We
Yes.
talked about Amami Samori Toure, who comes later on after Lord Carey in the later 1800s and resists European encroachment, using Islam as a tool to advance the cause of his people. This is liberation theology. In what ways did Lot Carey also use religion as a tool for liberation?
So before I can answer that, Jabari, there's an excerpt of the preface of the biography I want you to quickly bring up if you can. That talks about yeah.
Or this one?
It's the other. It's
The farewell sermon.
no that so in the biography in the first after the preface the introductory excerpt talks about how Christ sees everyone to be equal, and whether the person is poor or not, there's still potential for them to do what they want to do, so long as they have the capacity within them. If you know what I'm
So
talking about.
what I'm asking you to do is explain to me the similarities between the physical military struggle of Amami Samori Toure utilizing Islam as a tool for liberation.
Mm.
I'm asking you to do a comparison between that and what Lord Carey was doing in West Africa before his untimely death. Do you see
So
similarities or not?
yeah, the similarity is very clear. The similarities are clear, even though the method of doing it was very different. And that's what we're about to get into now. So to answer your question, Lord Carey and other Black liberation theologians similar to Lord Carey, they use the theme of they, they use the theme of they use the theme of equality, that everyone is equal in the eyes of God in their liberation theology preaching message. And that because everyone is equal in the eyes of God, they therefore have a right to self-determination, and they have a right to pursue whatever that they want to pursue. This was the central theme in their liberation theology or in their preaching message. After they would save souls, this would be the main thing to keep them enlightened, because at the time they believed that Africans were heathens. This was the mindset of the time. And they believed that because they were heathens, they needed to be given salvation. Salvation that would not only enlighten their souls, but enlighten their minds.
Anyone else?
Well, I stand to be corrected. Just what my what said. Um, in my mind, uh, Lord Carey was talking about what we call one God. Today, we're talking about all kinds of religion, but this is a preacher who is telling everybody that it's about time we go into the world, preach the gospel, so that even the old man in the village, Ma Musu, Ma Kema, who is all the way there in the bush, can be able to hear it. Because despite everything we're doing, despite of the subjugation, despite of everything we're going through right now, the only person that has the final authority or final decision, it has to do with God from a biblical perspective. So in my mind, like Paul said, it was all about, equality, or telling everybody that we have one single God, and I stand to be corrected. It's about time we do what is right, and I didn't see any hateful message or statement or any form of discrimination in his message.
So to give another arrow, in the farewell episode, Lord Kerry said, "I was he's coming to Africa to save a suffering race," and that alone speaks that when he came, he did not quit. He was speaking and teaching his people that we are all one people, we are all equal in the sight of God. Therefore, nobody should suffer you for being black. You should not be suffered because of the color of your skin, because God did not differentiate people based on color of your skin. So he brought message I would refer to as equity message, that making people to understand that we are all equal people in the sight of God. Therefore, we have right to self-determination. We have right to live freely regardless of the color of our skin.
Thank you. So skin color not really being an issue in Africa as much, right? So Lord Carey goes to Africa. This is not an issue of skin color. This is more of an issue of treating other people with decency. We have to remember that he was a evangelist or a missionary, an educator of Africans, people born in Africa, recaptured Africans and indigenous people. So his liberation message and those people that Lord Carey was teaching for the short time that he had his school running were mostly children that had come from oppressed classes, right? Children who had been sold into slavery, children who were abused, children who were misused. The children that he was catering to in his school were victims of tyranny, child laborers that had been captured through war and were being sold into slavery or being utilized right there at Cape Mesurado as laborers. These are the kids that he was teaching. Later on, you see missionaries teaching the children of nobility, right? But in the early days, the children that Lord Carey is teaching, those are poor, suffering, dejected children. I think that's very powerful. Because what happens to those poor, suffering, and dejected children? They become incorporated into the colony. They are much later, 1847, among the first Liberian citizens. So even though many of the children who benefited from Lord Carey mission, which is, by the way, not the current Lord Carey school, the current Lord Carey mission was named in honor of Lord Carey because he was an educator of poor children. But the most important thing I get out of this story of Lord Carey is that he was catering to the poor, suffering, dejected children. The children who would have been used and abused for the rest of their lives. They would have grown up as adults who were there to serve other people. And here he empowered them with literacy and with self-esteem.
Exactly so.
And those young people that he taught were part of the settlement and became Liberians in 1847, along with everyone else, right?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Jabari, I'll turn it back over.
Yeah, and that teaching and desire to lead people is what led him to, in the colony, have such a major influence. So when he was in Africa, of course, you guys talked about how his wife died of sickness. There was a lot going on, but he was able to persevere. He was able to get to that level of success. So he becomes a physician in the colony. He's elected as vice agent of the colony, and then he acted as a governor of the colony, having this leadership role, and that had a profound impact on how the settlement and colony was able to survive. Can you guys talk about some of the things that he did or exemplify those leadership qualities?
All right, so when they came, the wife was sick for quite some time, and unfortunately she passed. But if you read the Esther, so it was like, even though my wife has passed, I believe she will be in the better hands of God. And this will not stop me from doing what I've come to do. Though it's a sad thing physically, but in God, I believe that she's in God's hand. And I will deliver what I've come here to do for my people and for my country. And then he became physician in the colony, and then he was elected as vice agent, and then later on he became governor after the last one left. So this
Excellent.
also volume that he had come to sacrifice himself to help the people, regardless of whatever situation was around him. Like he said in the essay earlier, in the farewell essay, he didn't care what's going to happen when he comes to Africa. Whatever happened, so be it, but he has come here to perform what he has dedicated his life to.
Okay, so let's talk about what happened to Elder Lot Carey. We got to wrap up. Time's against us, but let's talk a little bit about what happened. What became of Elder Lot Carey? Why did his
So,
mission have to be taken over by others?
so Black Carey was unfortunately killed in a blast explosion. And we don't know if it was a blast explosion. There's not too much details on it, but
No, there's
it was,
details on it. He blew up in the storehouse that had all the dynamite.
and
Yes.
gunpowder, yeah.
But
It was an
yeah,
expensive,
what caused the explosion is what isn't too clear. But we know that he
yeah,
died in the
what
explosion.
caused the explosion.
Yeah. And I will read this excerpt. It's a Randall extract. He says, "On my arrival here, I was very much shocked to find that the vice agent, Mr. Carey, had been killed a few weeks before. It was his right here an explosion, but he says by the accidental explosion of gunpowder. His death was a great loss to our cause, as he had much influence with his people, both here and in the United States. An election for his successor had taken place."
So his death, for me, left a lot of room for speculation. So there's something we overlooked. During his time as a government agent in the Liberian colony, Black Carey had such a huge influence that during a time during a time when the people within the Liberian colony started to rebel against the white agents, more specifically when they weren't being given fair rations of food due to scarcity of food within the Liberian colony. You had these people, they would they would head to the public warehouse to take food without the permission of the agents. And this to me was basically a situation of hardship, imposed hardship through harsh laws. And because Black Care was also a government agent, I believe he was expected to fall in line with these white agents, but for that time being, he wasn't. He was in support of the rebellious action, which was justifiable due to the harsh and imposed laws that were put upon the people in the Liberian colony. So it led me to believe that Laquet was possibly a threat to these white agents, and they possibly saw him to be a hindrance further for further agendas that they might have had down the way, and they could have possibly orchestrated his death in the warehouse. This is just a speculation from my end because we don't know what caused the gunpowder explosion. But when I looked at the scenario involving those in the Liberian colony and the terrible relationship that they had with the white agents, it led me to come to form that conclusion because they were
Because
definitely
the white agents have been known for killing people.
That's why we keep saying speculation. Speculative.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean it's a
figuring it out.
speculation based on past pattern behavior. if
yeah.
every
So
if every day Isiaka
let me
walks in
make
the room and
sense.
kicks the table, every morning he kind of kick the table, he kicked the table. One day we hear the table being kicked, we assume that Isiaka kicked the table. That's all. And we don't see it.
So
That's how it
Yeah,
is.
but
Yeah.
we're not gonna lie on them. Whether they're evil or not, we gotta have proof.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if every morning you see, get up, wake up in the morning, kick the table, kick the table, kick the table. By the 10th time you hear the table being kicked, you will not say that, Zota.
That's the issue.
Yeah, so that was the unfortunate issue with them. But yeah,
The
like
white
Kerry was very selfless. He even in the face of death, he said he wasn't gonna go back to America. And I quote, he said, even with flying balls or gunshot flying past him, he still ain't gonna go back to America.
Excellent. I think you all did a very good job with this presentation. I think that it was a great learning experiment. Jabari, you did a great job guiding the conversation. Anyone who watches this will know a lot more about Lot Carey than they did before they watched it. So that's always the goal, is to share information. You did an excellent job. Now we have two possibilities for next Saturday, right? We can either
Yeah.
do we can either do Benjamin Joseph Knight Anderson or King Momolu.
Too good. Don't know which one to pick.
We would
So
think
let's see.
it was time for
Yeah, give us
people
time. Like these are two.
to
Like we can't rush it. Two great
two
people
great
to,
people.
to give presentation on. We don't want to rush it.
Wow.
So
Anderson,
Anderson or Momolu, everyone votes. And the audience, if they're able to comment in the comments, they can also vote.
I vote Anderson.
Vote Anderson.
That man was crazy.
Thank you for Richard Anderson.
I vote for King Momolu from Bobulu.
I
Who else?
Anderson was some work. Anderson was some work. I will give that up. Anderson was some work.
He did some work.
Anderson was crazy. He did crazy work. No, I'm just kidding.
Votes. We got three for
I'm joking. Anderson is a fun topic, but I vote on King Momolu from Bobulu. He was the most powerful. He was more powerful than the Liberian government.
Mm-hmm.
So who do you vote for, Kara? Anderson or Momolu? I'm not trying to influence your vote, Kara. I'm not influencing your vote. But we've got 3 for Anderson.
every time.
I thought my vote should be a secret.
Huh?
That's it.
I thought
Oh,
my
who
vote
did you
should be a
say? Sorry, I
secret.
didn't hear his vote. What did Kara say?
I'm saying I thought my vote should be a secret. My secret.
We voted
What do you
already.
think that this is? No,
This
this is open and clear and transparent. Because I can go back tomorrow and say, no, everybody voted for Momolu.
Well,
I can go back tomorrow and
uh,
say it was unanimous for King Momolu.
So for me, I vote Momolu.
No pressure. No pressure.
Oh,
No
yeah,
pressure.
I got another vote for Momolu. Who else hasn't voted? So, Mokhtar, Kura, go ahead.
so I'll
Huh?
vote for Momolu. Yeah.
Okay, so Isiaka and I vote for King Momolu.
Jabari, break the
We got
tie.
3 for Momolu. We got 3 for Momolu and 3 for Anderson.
I
I'm
said,
breaking
Kura, whose side you on here?
I am on Momolu's side.
Yeah!
So we got 3. We got 3. We
No,
got 3.
no intimidation.
We got 3 for Anderson. We got 3 for Momolu. I'm gonna break the tie and say we going with Anderson.
Yeah.
No, we're not, no.
4 get 3.
Oh my
And
God.
4
No,
and
no,
4
no.
get 3.
No, somebody in the audience, please vote.
It's 4 against 3.
So we're gonna go with Benjamin Joseph Knight Anderson. So what we can do? So y'all want to go with Anderson? Oh
Yeah.
man. So we'll do King Momolu after Anderson.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think chronologically speaking, it may make sense to do Momolu after Anderson. Chronologically speaking, because now that I think about it, Anderson will also introduce us to Anderson's journey introduces us to Momolu's subject kings, like the tributary kings that used to give tribute or pay taxes to Momolu. Benjamin Joseph Knight Anderson interacts with a lot of them. So when we finish that, the following Saturday, when we talk about King Momolu, it's going to make more sense. It's going to make more sense. So I think that's fine. So we'll do Anderson next Saturday, and the following week, we're going to do King Momolu of Bopulu, which nobody talks about. But he was more powerful and commanded more territory and more citizens in the Liberian government.
Exactly.
So, all right. Thank you very much, everyone. That was wonderful. We'll see you in regular class.
Before we go, I want to give the 2 shout outs. two comments. They said watching from Antigua and Barbuda in the Caribbean. So shout out to Reed. And then we got our great brother Mosi tuning in from Atlanta. He said, "Good job, Academy students." So wanted to highlight those two comments.
So I don't know who Tarif Takuma is, but Antigua and Barbuda is my adopted country, just so you know. I'm from Green Bay Hill. Look, I tell myself I'm from Green Bay Hill in Antigua. So if you're watching, what's up? I'm Antiguan too. All right.
All right. Well,
Thank
thanks,
you
guys.
guys
Thanks
so
for tuning
much.
in.
All right. Take care, everybody. Peace.
Thank you
Bye.
guys. This is a great edition of the
Bye.
Leadership Academy. Peace.
Bye.